Nigeria's parliament has opened for legislative business in the new year as lawmakers roll up their sleeve in preparation for a busy year. The recommittal and consideration of the Electoral Act amendment bill splits opinions in the parliament. House of Reps is worried about missing arms and ammunition. And later on the program,
laws are to be obeyed by the people.
Senator representing Imo North joins us to talk about the Electoral Act amendment bill passed by the Senate and also other matters of national importance. This is the Hallett Chambers on TVC News. I am Tijesu Aduyi. Because we're back at their duty post this week after the Christmas break. They say the priority this time will be the Electoral Act amendment bill, reviewing the 1999 Constitution and an effective performance of oversight duties. The Electoral Act amendment bill was the first matter legislators attended to after their ego was bruised following President Muhammadu Buhari's rejection of the bill. Now they have resolved to remove the contentious Clause 84 that imposed direct primaries on political parties as a mode of choosing candidates for elective offices. The Senate was the first to consider a motion of recommittal of the Electoral Act amendment bill after consideration by the Committee of the Whole. The decision on Clause 84 was rescinded.
The bill stands. There is provision for all the possible options for selection of candidates from the presidency to the councillorship. The available options we have: 1, the direct primaries; 2, the indirect primaries; 3, the consensus candidature. What this means is political parties are now, once this becomes law, are now challenged to ensure that they choose what is appropriate, what is suitable for them when it comes to the processes of producing their candidates.
Give the political parties an opportunity to do things in their own way. That is what democracy is all about.
We have made a lot of progress. We looked at the areas of observations raised by the president, and we agreed that we need to be more democratic. They were saying we are not democratic because we didn't give party a choice. We will stick ourselves to direct primaries alone. But now that we have given the party a choice, even the Senate gave them all the 3 options, either direct or indirect, or even consensus.
In the House of Representatives, it was not a smooth sail for the recommittal of this important bill. Members of the opposition attempted to stage a walkout and also nerves were frayed over the matter. Eventually, the House of Reps passed the bill.
House resolves to commit Section 84, Subsection 2 of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021 to the Committee of the Whole for reconsideration.
I need to state categorically that what was adopted, what was considered and adopted by the House was only one clause.
The principles of what we have always done here, and it is my suspicion, Mr. Chairman, that it is intended for this Electoral Act not to be signed. These are all obstacles that have been put on the way of Nigerians to actually determine who governs them so that they can provide effective leadership.
The spokesman of the House of Representatives, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, says the lower legislative house did not override the president's veto on the Electoral Act amendment bill in the interest of nation building. He joins me now to give an insight into the matter. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Let's start off with the drama that greeted the eventual passage of the Electoral Act amendment bill on Wednesday.
As you know, we have always put this bill on the front banner because in our legislative agenda, one of the key things that this night assembly set out to achieve happened to be electoral reform. And we chose that because we know that Nigerians wanted our electoral system to deliver more credible elections. And that is a desire that is in line with various instruments we are signatories to as a democratic entity. I've always mentioned we are signatories to Article 6 of the ECOWAS protocol on governance and democracy, Article 17 of the African Union Charter on Democracy, Election and Good Governance, as well as Article 21 of the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. And one thing that runs through them is that they want free, fair, inclusive, credible election. And when you talk about credible election, you're talking about various elements like the inclusiveness of that election, the competitiveness of that election, the transparency of that election, and how accountable that election is. That is the accountability element of it. Now, it's missing in the former Electoral Act or the current Electoral Act that we have. And that's what we're seeking for this new Electoral Act, to be able to incorporate most of these elements. This is to make us achieve the expected outcome from a credible election. The nexus we have seen that is between a credible election and other indicators that's supposed to, or indices that's supposed to help us build a nation, includes stabilizing the political space, and also building a healthy, balanced social space, as well as economic prosperity. So that was what energized us to push more for this Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Now, what happened in the House has to do with the letter that was transmitted to us from the President on just one clause that he was not comfortable with, and he gave his reasons. And he has a right to do so.
It appeared the opposition members echoed the yearnings of the people whom you had met at constituency levels and gave consent for direct primaries, but the House failed to muscle up enough courage to stick to what the citizens want.
There's nothing like muzzling of courage. I keep hearing that language anyway. We don't need to muzzle any courage. Nobody is threatening us. Nobody is putting any gun on our head. Whatever we have done or whatever we will do for this particular in this particular night assembly is as a result of the wishes, the hunger, the desire, the needs of Nigerian people. We are holding this position in trust, and how you use it matters a lot. You are saying what Nigerians want is the direct primaries. How many percentage of Nigerians wanted direct primaries? And who said that direct primaries have been taken off the piece of legislation? We have not removed direct primaries. All we have done is to include indirect primaries. I say so because, according to Mr. President says, depending on the realities of the political party, if they can't do direct primaries, they should go ahead and do it. If they can do indirect primaries, they should go ahead and do it. So a combination of both of them will help us advance our democracy further.
We had a couple of closed-door meetings, yet PDP members attempted a walkout.
The PDP, I'm surprised to hear that, because I didn't see a PDP that was not happy with the position that had been taken by the House. I saw a group of individuals among the PDP House of Rep members who wanted to do the bid of some people outside the Parliament and some people outside the House of Rep who wanted consensus to be included to what we had already presented to Mr. President. And they were having meetings to push, they were lobbying, pushing for Mr. Speaker to bend over and include consensus into the options. And you see, majority of the members of the House said no, it's against the rule of the House. The rule of the House as captured in Article 12, Rule 20, 21, 22, and 23 is that when a particular bill has been recommitted, to the House by virtue of the fact that Mr. President withheld assent, the rule of the House is that you don't go outside that scope. You have to stay within the boundaries of that particular clause. So if Mr. President said clause 2, I'm not happy with it, do something about it, clause 4, I'm not happy with it, clause 6, you are only supposed to handle those clauses mentioned, specifically speaking. So in this case, the letter of Mr. President on his page 5 and number 5 of his last paragraph stated the reason, which was directing the House to see what they do about Clause 84 sub 2 on direct and indirect primaries. That if they do that, that was the reason he was withholding our Senate.
But we saw the Senate approve consensus for political parties.
Well, but I don't know what informed the Senate's addition of consensus into the amendment that they just did, or with what has been recommitted to them. Maybe their Senate rules allows them to do that, but our House rule doesn't allow us to add anything further to what has gone to Mr. President and back. And also the request of Mr. President, this emphasis must be made. The request from Mr. President, written to us in a formal letter, says direct and indirect. Never mentioned, no word on consensus was mentioned in that letter. And we cannot give Mr. President what he didn't ask. Even if we wanted to give him, we are not allowed by the rules of the House to give Mr. President what he didn't ask. So people who may be trying to please one person or the other, legislation is meant for the interest of the nation, not for an individual.
The Nigerian House of Representatives says it will probe allegations of the missing police arms and ammunition. The lawmakers are worried that these weapons might be in the wrong hands, especially as the wave of insecurity across the country is at a frightening level.
The House is aware of the findings in the report that the Police High Command failed to keep record of unserviceable and expired firearms and ammunition owing to non-compliance to the internal control system of the Nigerian Police Force. The House is also aware that records of the total number of unserviceable firearms were not produced for examinations, and there were no returns from Adamawa State Command, Police Mobile Force, 46, 56, 64, and 68 for the period under review.
Joining me now is the Senator representing Imo North, Frank Ibezim. Welcome to the Hallowed Chambers. The Senate has passed the Electoral Act Amendment Bill removing the contentious Clause 84. Is this truly the wish of your constituents? Remember, the Senate President said lawmakers will consult before taking action on the matter.
We've always said that it's important for elected members to dialogue, sit down, reach out to. There's no time you're going to reach out to every member of your constituency, but you reach out to stakeholders and also talk to those that you know are also knowledgeable of what the issues are. What it is, if you recall, I was one of those that believe that you can't just have a blanket electoral transmission of results, because there are places we are still battling with transmissions, we're battling with all sorts of network issues, and you cannot take an election and just say in blanket order that this is what it is. And I also said that the Constitution has allowed INEC to look at real-time situations, to know exactly what is good at a time and how to apply it. And so that was why I was one of those that said, hey, in my opinion, the country is not ripe for electronic transmission just like that, and that we should allow INEC to make that decision. A lot of people didn't actually stay in to vote one way or the other. And I think that if you're representing the people, you should, if you believe in one thing and you've researched it, you should start firm to say this is what it is. Talking right now about the president not assenting to the Electoral Act bill because of direct, indirect, and or consensus. I also believe that we can't box people into just one aspect, because this is democracy. If you say, hey, it has to be direct, you're now saying you're not being democratic. Let them choose. Let the political parties choose. If you say indirect, you're not being democratic. I don't know if you know the difference between what the Senate and the House of Reps are dealing with now.
Since there were consultations, especially with the House of Representatives, why is there still a difference in the revised bill passed by both chambers? Because the Senate left all choices open and the House eliminated voting by consensus in political party elections.
What I agree with yesterday at the plenary was that ultimately the two houses should sit down and look at if there are gray areas. And that's what it ought to be, because the Senate nor the House of Reps can't unilaterally make it a bill that would go for assent. So there must be an understanding. But the major thing that I'm hearing is that the House of Reps are saying that they talked about direct and indirect. They never mentioned consensus. And for me, I've always said laws are to be obeyed by the people. What is consensus? It costs money to do either direct or indirect primaries. And it's important for us to do the right thing. If a party decides they want to do direct or indirect. But there are times when everybody unanimously, majority, 90% says, almost 95% says, this is who we want. That's consensus. Why do you now have to go back to do direct or indirect primary? Because if you know that in this room, everybody that is a stakeholder, everybody that is supposed to be part of what you're doing in the party have said, hey, this is who we want, I think there may not be any need to. But again, the House and the Senate would agree and resolve. This morning I heard on AIT when a member was saying, Mr. President has brought back this, and all he's talking about is direct and indirect. So if there's no place that talked about consensus, and we don't think it's necessary to take that in, so be it. What is important right now is for this country to move forward. Elections are around the corner. INEC has to go to work, and this is holding INEC down. And that is why the National Assembly, the Senate, decided that whatever we do, we must take care of this before we move forward. And that's why we were able to.
What is next?
The Senate and the House of Reps would have to have harmonization, and I agree. And looking at it, there's no reason why we should worry about anything, because it's just that meeting. That meeting will happen and that decision will be taken. And I don't see how any of these issues would create any chaos.
Insecurity has remained a major challenge for this administration, and the Senate has passed several resolutions in an attempt to prefer solutions. All of this hasn't worked. In your opinion, is inadequate funding the problem, or why does it seem it defies all solutions thrown at it?
Well, it's when you say an administration, I look at it like this is a Nigerian problem. And the earlier we understand it, there's no way you can curb insecurity when you have about 49% of our population being under 40 or 40 and under. And then you're expecting only state and federal government to be the only avenue to give employment. What is happening is frustration has set in, and we need to tackle these things properly. There are informal ways of employing people. We have to go back to the understanding of private sector, thinking of how to get people to think of self-employment. So we need to begin to address the issue of technical education properly. We don't need to have foreigners coming here to lay our tires. We don't need to have them coming here to do the paint job. What we need to do is train our people and retrain them. Get our people to understand that we have to give employment to Nigerians, but we can't just give employment to Nigerians without getting them to doing the jobs well. And that is what it is. We need to attack it. This population didn't grow overnight. You see, that is the thing. And I've always said that the government is a continuum. And in trying to solve these issues, this majority of those people causing this mayhem are also under 40. So what it tells you is this frustration laced with all sorts of drugs infiltrating areas, and what do you expect? So while fighting insecurity, we should fight unemployment.
In your state, Imo State, insecurity is also a major problem. But do you agree with the governor when he says politicians are behind the violent attacks and kidnappings, even though he failed to clearly name the sponsors?
After election, there's need for politicians from all divides to come together, to work together, to solve any prevalent challenge in a state or in a country. And what it is there's no way. This governor has tried, gone to the federal government, and they're giving all sorts of incentives to quell what is happening in Imo. We have also tried to have stakeholders meeting. The churches have tried to invite all these politicians from different divide. But unfortunately, that peace has not happened. And it takes 2 or 3 to make a peace. It doesn't take one group. So what you can see is a governor that is saying, we're singing different songs. Why would, if a politician's body language is showing that he doesn't want a government to succeed because you're thinking of tenure. That is not governance. Right now, politicians of all divide should come together. And I use this medium to call on politicians of all divide in my state, whether it is APC, PDP, APGA. When it's time for election, we go back to the trenches. But let us save our state. And I know that, yes, if all of us will talk to the young men and women, those young men and women are not totally from outside my state. So those young men and women have people they listen to. But if you have a politician who, in the back of his house, is talking about the need for mayhem, how do you expect the young people not to unleash it? So that's basically what it is. And I think it's a good thing that the governor did not mention anybody, because security has to be left in the hands of the security organizations to find out and confirm. There are ways to find out and confirm. So by the governor not mentioning people, it now means that they had no intention of calling people in the first place. Maybe, I don't know whether it was quoted out of context or anything, but what solution to this is not by naming anybody. It's for the law enforcement agents to fish out those people and then book them.
So far from your representation of the people of Imo North Senatorial District, and based on the needs assessments carried out, what do they desire most from the government?
What majority of the people desire most: peace and harmony, and that comes from the right employment. It comes from solving insecurity challenges. It comes from getting the right set of education so that our people would get the right set of training, so we can create our own jobs, our own self-employment.
All right. Thank you very much, sir, for your time.
Are you one of those worried about the increasing debt profile and Mr. President's consistent borrowing?
Not necessarily so. What I'm worried about is, what are we doing with the monies? Are there ways to do checks and balances so that we would build the right infrastructure that would create the wealth that would make it easier for us to pay back the borrowing? First world, if you're talking about civilized world, what is the debt ratio of America what are they borrowing? But the thing is, if you're borrowing money every year in, year out, we are not, you ask people to use the money and the monies are not used properly by Nigerians, and we stay back in square one. Because if you borrow money and you build very good roads and we have electricity, we are going to have employment and industries. The taxes from the employment and industries will reduce our borrowing rate. The Nigerian problem is not the rate of borrowing. Nigerian problem is just that we haven't used what we have borrowed to do the necessary things we need to do. We must create infrastructure. Back in developed worlds, they don't joke with their infrastructure because they don't joke with the electricity. They will not joke with the industries because they want to make sure that they have employment for the people. When you have employment for the people, you reduce insecurity, you reduce all these vices. The country will be peaceful, and the country will make enough money to pay down their bills.
That's our program for this week. You can watch a repeat broadcast on Sunday. Also, you can watch this episode again on TVC News YouTube channel. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share. You can follow me on Twitter at TVC to get updates from the National Assembly. Thank you for watching. I am Tijesu Adiri. See you next time.